Okay, so now what I'd like to talk about, still related to the epidermis, is skin color and how that relates to calcium and also to cancer. Okay, so there's going to be three different things that affect skin color. One is keratin. This is an orange-yellow pigment that's going to accumulate in the epidermal cells. You can find it in a lot of orange vegetables, so if you eat a whole bunch of these, it can actually start to make your skin color a bit more orangish. Okay, you do have to eat quite a bit, but it is possible. I want to talk about number 3 also, the dermal blood supply. So if you remember, the dermis, okay, is from here to here, and notice the blood supply in red and blue, okay? So it turns out running through these blood vessels, okay, is a molecule called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is what binds to oxygen. So hemoglobin bound to oxygen. When hemoglobin is bound to oxygen, because there is an iron metal involved, it is going to have a red pigment. Okay? And when hemoglobin is not bound to oxygen, okay, it is going to be more of a, and I guess I should say this is a bright red pigment, and this is going to be a darker pigment. Okay, so it's not going to be that bright red color. And so you may have noticed that if people stop having oxygen, places where their skin is thinner, say along the lips, may start to turn bluish color, and that's because they're lacking this red pigment. Okay, and if you start to see that bluish color, which means a lack of oxygen, the term for that, it's in your homework, is called cyanosis. Okay, so dermal blood supply because of hemoglobin. Keratin is also deposited in your epidermal cells. These both give skin its color. Then the last one that I want to talk about is melanin. Okay, and so as we talked about last time, melanin is made by these cells called melanocytes. And so this is looking at the deepest layer of the epidermis. This is the stratum basale. Here's your basal cell. Here's another basal cell in pink. Here's its nucleus. Okay, and so going up this way, we're going to stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum. And so you see right here at this basal layer is this monster-looking cell with these little tendrils coming out. Okay, so this is a melanocyte. And these little small dots are little vesicles, and they're packed with melanin. And melanin is a brown pigment. And you notice that we're depositing the melanin. You see these brown speckles. We're depositing melanin in the stratum basale. So everybody, unless you're an albino, which is a genetic inability to make melanin, you're going to have some melanin in your basal layer. Now, if you have lighter skin, then that melanin is going to be degraded either in the generally either in the stratum basale or in the stratum spinosum layers. If you are a darker skinned individual, then that melanin is going to last up into more superficial layers. The other thing that makes the difference in whether or not you have darker skin or lighter skin is going to be how much melanin each of these cells makes. Okay, so most people can often have generally about the same number of melanocytes, at least from what I'm aware that's been measured, but some people have melanocytes that are very active and they make tons of melanin. That's going to make you darker skinned, or they're going to make just a low number of melanin, and that'll make you lighter skinned. Now, if you're like me, you may have freckles, which means that you have different spots that are darker. So it's not your whole skin, it's just certain spots are darker. And that means that melanocytes in a specific area are more active. They're making more melanin. Okay, so let's think a little bit about this, and I'd like to go through the notes because I think they'll help you think about it. Okay, so what is the function at the cellular level of these melanocytes? And the function is to make and secrete melanin. That's all they do. They make it and they secrete it. So what normally affects how active melanocytes are? Now these two answers, they aren't in the book, but if you think about it, you should be able to answer it. What determines how dark somebody's skin is? Well, there's two factors. One, obviously, genetics. Makes sense. You're born with it. Depends on what your mom and dad gave you. And then the other factor is sun exposure. Okay, so if you're exposed to the sun, that makes these cells more active. They make you darker. And if you're not exposed to the sun, these cells become less active. Okay. And let's just really pound this home. Greater melanocyte activity means that skin color is darker or lighter. Well, more melanocyte activity means more melanin, which means you're going to be darker. Okay. This right here, what pigments besides melanin affect skin color, you should be able to fill that in based on what we just talked about. This is the really important part that I want you to understand. Okay, when sun exposure, and what we're specifically talking about here, sun exposure, that's the same thing as UV exposure, or we could say ultraviolet light exposure. Okay, all of those mean the same thing. The sunlight has ultraviolet light in it. So what does it do when sunlight hits skin cells? Well, it's going to cause mutations in those skin cells. Makes them abnormal, and that's going to increase your risk for skin cancer. Okay? So let's look at this. So if we have greater melanocyte activity, well, and let's think about this. What is the purpose of melanin? Okay, so the purpose of melanin is going to do two things. So melanin, the first thing it's going to do is it protects cells from UV damage. But the problem with melanin is that it prevents the skin from forming vitamin D. Okay? So that's actually going to be the problem with melanin. Is one, it protects you from this UV light, so it protects you from the damage, but it turns out you need enough sunlight to make vitamin D, and if you've got melanin there, you can't make as much because you're not getting as much UV. Okay, so let's look at this. First we have darker skin. Okay, so let's look at that first. So if we have darker skin, that means we're going to have more melanin, which means we have more protection from UV, so we have less cancer. But remember, if we don't have UV, we also have less vitamin D. Okay? So it's a trade-off. Now let's look at lighter skin. Okay? And let me make this a little bit smaller so that you can hopefully see it all on one screen. So lighter skin is going to have less melanin. That's what makes it lighter. That means we're going to have less protection from UV. Okay? And so I should say on this you're less likely to get cancer. You can still get cancer if you sit around and bake in the sun all day, but you're less likely if you have darker skin. But for lighter skin, you're going to be more likely to get cancer. And you're going to make more vitamin D. Okay? Why do we care about vitamin D? Well, it turns out, so this asks, increased vitamin D synthesis causes what to happen in the intestines? it causes you to absorb more calcium from your food or drink. So let's add this into the picture. So if we have less vitamin D, less calcium absorbed from food. Okay? Down here, more vitamin D, more calcium absorbed from food. Okay? And so it's really a trade-off. Now, the good thing these days with our modern society is that most of our foods, and if you need it, vitamins, at least here in the U.S., you're going to be able to get that vitamin D that you need so you can absorb plenty of calcium from your food. So this is generally not a problem, at least in the U.S. And for lighter-skinned individuals, well, yes, you are more likely to get cancer, but we have sunscreen, so we may not naturally have the melanin, but a person like me with very light skin can go and get sunscreen and use that as my protection. Okay, so this is really the trade-off right here. Just as kind of a health point of interest, darker-skinned individuals are less likely to get cancer, but they can still get cancer. And so I would definitely consult with your physician about your specific skin type to make sure that you're taking appropriate precautions. So don't assume that just because you have darker skin, you definitely cannot get cancer. Okay, that is incorrect. The other thing that I would say, and I have this listed in the homework as a public health announcement, okay, but you will see some tanning salons that may advertise safe UV exposure from tanning beds, and there is no such thing. There are 3 types of UV light, and there are studies showing that all 3 of them can cause mutations in your cells. Therefore, all 3 of them pose a cancer risk. There's a link to the Centers for Disease Control, which studies this in the U.S. population, and you can learn more, but I just want to make that point that scientifically, there is no such thing as safe UV. Okay, and so with that, you have some activities here to help you with skin color and what are the chemicals, what are the factors that affect it.